Has anyone ever told you, well, the worst they can say is no? Well, if you are a Russian mercenary group working in Africa, the same goes to you. The story I'm about to tell you, I thought it was completely fake. I thought it was a troll. But no, there is a Russian mercenary group named Wagner operating in Africa, and they asked the United States for some money to help them with their operations. Now, please stick with me, because Wagner asking money from the US government to fund their private militaries in Africa, there might actually be a small argument as to why they might need this money. Again, stick with me, this will all sort of make sense. Now, real quick, for those of you who are not aware, the unfortunate fact for the continent of Africa, it almost seems like we're back in colonial times and Africa is just being pieced apart by rebel groups, factions, and countries. Now, to be fair, amongst major African countries, they have actually allowed for outside assistance, whether it's monetary funds, whether it's security assistance, to help secure their countries and to make sure their countries don't completely crumble. And I promise we will get to Wagner asking for money, but you need to understand why all of this makes sense and why this all comes together. You have countries like the United States who was trying to battle ISIS in their own territories. So countries like Nigeria, that's why the United States, more specifically Special Forces, and other light infantry groups have been operating out of Africa, especially recently, to try combating ISIS and other militant groups. And this is a major key doctrine for special operations. We will help train your paramilitary groups. In return, you will be our allies in case we call on you, or at least we can use your countries for military training, etc. Now, from Wagner's perspective, or really Russia's perspective, because here's what happens. The way Wagner does business in Africa is that they are essentially the ambassadors of Russia. You see, they go into war-torn countries who might not have a lot of money, but they have a lot of instability. But nonetheless, Wagner will come into your country and we will protect whatever you want us to protect. We will take out whoever you want us to take out. But in return, you might need to buy some AK-47s from Russia, or you need to give us some natural resources like copper. Now, you can see how both business models are a little out there. From the United States, we're going to send in our most elite troops, we're going to help train you, we're going to take out the enemy. From the Russian perspective, we're going to take everybody out, we're going to take out militant groups, but hey, give us your copper. So let's break down the problem. When you look at the country of Mali, Mali actually has a great relationship with Wagner. And arguably, Wagner is doing their job. They're pushing ISIS and other militant groups out of Mali. But here's the issue. Those militant groups are going into countries where the United States is operating out of. So, you can see why the United States looks bad. You have the greatest military in the world. You have the most elite fighters. And they're operating in these countries, supposedly protecting citizens. But then all of a sudden, you have militant groups who are bleeding into these countries. What's really happening is they're bleeding out of Mali and coming into all of these territories where the United States is operating out of. So, Wagner said, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to ask the United States, why don't you guys just give us some money and let us handle the militant groups, because you guys don't look like you know what you're doing. Now, this letter was specifically sent to Antony Blinken, and he is the Secretary of State. But this also comes at a really bad time because right now he's being subpoenaed, as in they're looking into all of his documents as to why the evacuation of Afghanistan didn't go too well. So he's dealing with that, and now he's dealing with a Russian mercenary group asking for money. But let's get to the letter. So this request and letter came from Prigozhin, and he funded Wagner. And one thing you have to remember, this is a businessman. He's running a security contracting company. At least that's what we would compare it to in the United States. He has Wagner Group, and they are operating frontline operations in Ukraine, not doing the greatest, some success here and there, but they're also operating down in Africa where they are doing well. So let me get to the letter. The letter states, I invite you to support Wagner PMC's efforts in ensuring safety and security in Africa by sponsoring a new project named Wagner, Safe Africa, in which you can invest, thereby saving American taxpayer money. And this is where Wagner sort of has a case against the United States. He says, The group has been doing this way more efficiently than American proxies, who get paid large amounts of money but don't provide security to Africa. He even says this: every single Wagner PMC project was financed by me as a private entity and was distinguished by the high efficiency of each invested dollar. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting like supervillain vibes from this. I'm really trying to be super down the middle and report on both sides. I can see where Russia is going with this and why this kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it doesn't make sense. Now, I'm going to give Wagner a little credit. Oh my gosh. But look, it makes sense. They're playing into the stereotype of the United States will go into a country and then will finance a paramilitary to protect their nation. Then that whole paramilitary falls apart, or professional army, and now it's up to the United States to protect everyone and the people. And look, what world do we live in? He's right. Vietnam War, Afghanistan War, Iraq War, now Syria. Not so much in Africa, but we might get to the point. But he does have a point coming from Wagner. But here's where things start to crumble. We're going to go so surface level and then we'll actually dig deep. On the surface level, in what world does Russia think that the Secretary of State is going to give money to a paramilitary Russian group operating out of Africa? You are better off playing the lottery and hopefully winning $1 million than asking the Secretary of State for a penny. Second off, Wagner does literally whatever they have to do to ensure their security. And what that means is they do not care about civilian casualties. They will poison your well if they know that ISIS or whatever group is in that town, everybody gets it. Not only these Islamist groups, not only these paramilitary groups. So, as you can see, with Wagner's hands not tied behind their back and being able to do whatever they have to do, obviously it looks like they're getting the job done. But when you really investigate and dig into what they're doing, it's not a good look. So I couldn't find a direct response to this particular request or letter being sent to the United States, but what I could find is that Blinken's assessment of Wagner operating in Africa is not favorable. Now, obviously, from the US perspective, anything that Russia does is bad, but for the most part, I do think that there's evidence to back the claims that wherever Wagner goes, there seems to be a lot of destruction. Because again, they can do whatever they want. They're being paid by their host country to just get these militants out of here. I don't care how you do it. Now, what I do want to add is that we don't live in a world where Russia and the United States never work together. Sort of indirectly, while fighting in Syria, Russia at one point was actually targeting ISIS locations, and there was a brief moment of United States and Russia correlations operating in Syria. We're not the best of friends, but we both don't like ISIS. But I do not think we live in a world where the United States would be giving money, nonetheless really working with a paramilitary group in Africa to help form security bonds in Africa. We drew our lines in the sand as a country. The United States supports NATO. NATO supports Ukraine. There are US military weapons and gear being used by the Ukrainian army to fight Wagner, especially in locations like Bakhmut. We're seeing a lot of really tough and fierce action coming out of Wagner fighting against the Ukrainians. So why would the US military in turn now pay Wagner? And this is the really sad reality for these war-torn countries in Africa. Whether or not a country has good intentions, when you go into these countries, the people rely on you. And when you have people like Wagner who don't care about you, it's very tough to hear and to read about. So that's the story. Leave down your comments and opinions down below. I thought this story was completely fake, but again, I do not live in a world or see a situation where Wagner and the United States will ever come together in any sort of situation. Maybe the United States and Mother Russia, maybe one day there will be a relationship that gets formed again, but not with a paramilitary group who's doing whatever they want in Africa. Again, leave your comments and opinions down below, and we'll see you later.